So today on this episode of Ascension with A Course in Miracles, the focus is going to be on the importance of cultivating a relationship with God. Not just any God, not the God of religion, but the God of love, the God of truth, the one true creator, source, eh, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to use the word God because, this has been a journey of leaving God to return to God for me. I had to leave the God of the church, the God of the Catholic Church, the God of punishment and sacrifice, the God that would demand the sacrifice of a newborn child, that would ask Abraham to sacrifice his firstborn son, a God that would turn people into pillars of salt. I didn't like that God. As a matter of fact, I wanted nothing to do with that God. That mean-spirited God reminded me a lot of my father, especially when my father was drunk. I didn't want a relationship with that God. However, inside of all of that, I felt an affinity with Jesus. I felt a connection to this loving, kind person who would protect people, who would protect the prostitute, who would let people know, hey, cast the first stone if you have no sins. If you've never made an error, or don't point at the speck in somebody else's eye if you haven't taken out the log out of your own eye. Jesus, for me, personified equality, treating everybody the same. Religion, for me, was about double standards. These people get this and the rest get that. And if you want to get this, you either have to pay or you have to sell your soul or something. And to me, that just never sat okay within my childlike beingness. Not childlike, I was a child. I would come home and I would listen to these Catholic sermons. Actually, let me be more accurate. I grew up in the Dominican Republic, so I never understood what they said in church because it was always in Latin, which I always found it so silly. These men wearing robes and these big, silly looking hats. It was like, what is this? I thought that this was like Halloween all the time. It was crazy to me. But I went to Catholic schools, and in the Catholic schools, they gave us instructions, they gave us lessons, and we reviewed passages and things like that. That's how I learned what little I learned about the Bible was from the nuns in my Catholic school. And it just made no sense. It absolutely made no sense. How can Jesus go around saying that God is a God of love, but yet we start reading the Old Testament and it's not a very loving God. It's a very mean God. Yes, there's some beautiful things in there. Some of the messages are absolutely so empowering, so really, if you take them to heart, you can find so much goodness in there. And I am by no means a Bible scholar. As a matter of fact, I know very little about the Bible, but bits and pieces that I have taken have given me an overall picture of what makes no sense, what is dualistic, and what is so loving and absolutely what I want to follow. And fast forward to when I was in my 40s and experienced the greatest fear of my life, which was right after my mother died. I felt this terror that I was going to die just like my mother had, and I had been to, I had dealt with death before. My dad had died a couple of years before my mom. My grandparents had passed away. I had friends. I had the children of friends who had passed away. Going to funerals and recognizing the grief that is experienced through death, that wasn't new to me. So when my mom passed, I knew I'm going to grieve. I was totally prepared for that. What I was not prepared for was the terror that I felt, because that is when my mortality became really clear. If my mom died, then I'm going to die too. And at that time, what came up for me was this fear of going to hell. And inside of that story, I recognized how scared I was of death because I had just the information that I had received from the Catholic Church. And after the Catholic Church, When I moved to the US, I went to a non-denominational holy roller churches, and that made me feel good in some ways because the music was really cool. But some of the stuff that I observed in the church, I didn't like one bit. Like, for example, there was a family there. I'll never forget this. I mean, this is 40 years ago, but I'll never forget this. There was a boy that, and I went to my junior years when I moved, or I guess I moved the summer before I was a junior in high school, and I went to the private school of the church. Harvest Temple was the name of that school. And there was a boy in my class, and I can't remember his first name, but the last name was Kennedy. And he was part of the family or the church family. His family, I think there was he might have had a brother and a sister, if I'm not mistaken. There were three kids. Not sure if it was two girls and a boy. That doesn't matter. But this boy, last name Kennedy, his family was going through a really hard time, and they had, I think mom had an illness, and they fell on financial hard times. And I remember the church at the time was going, the pastor, oh my gosh, this stuff is coming back to me. The pastor's name was Vep Ellis. And they were doing a fundraiser because the pastor needed a new car and he was going to get a new Cadillac. And everybody was donating money to get Vep Ellis a new Cadillac. And then all of a sudden, this family, the Kennedy family, is having a tough time, and they're not going to be able to afford for this boy to continue to go to the private school. And when I heard what happened, I was so shocked. I wanted nothing to do with that church. As a matter of fact, my senior year, I was like, I'm not coming back here. And I went to public school. First time in my life I ever went to public school was as a senior in high school. Talk about a shocker, but that's a whole different story. Back to this boy named Kennedy. He had to quit school because the family didn't have the money, because the church made a decision that instead of granting him a scholarship, because that would take away money from the church, they were going to fund the Cadillac for Pastor, I think it was Pastor Vep Ellis. And I was like, this is not what Jesus would do. This is not loving. After that, I became an atheist. I wanted nothing to do with church. I wanted nothing to do with any of that stuff. So somewhere between, I guess I was, 16, 17 years old, up until probably in my early 30s, I wanted nothing to do with church. And the only reason in my early 30s, I kind of wanted to find a local church. By then, I lived in Atlanta. I had my daughter. I felt this calling to connect with God because I felt there is something there. This child has come with this such perfection about her, and there's holiness there. This is coming from somewhere. So I wanted to come to know God again. So I went to another non-denominational church, great music, but still the fear of God, and it just made to me no sense. How can this creator that creates these perfect children, holy children, filled with light, nothing but pure love and innocence and perfection, how can that also do things that are not perfect and loving? It just did not make sense. So fast forward, my mom passes away, and all of a sudden I have to face this fear of God. Facing that fear of God led me down rabbit holes about how did that get distorted? If Jesus says God is love, and the Old Testament says, God should be feared, God is wrathful, what the fuck? It's like this just makes no sense. Thank goodness that I had that training with that insanity, that those lies, because it didn't sit well within my beingness. That was probably the first time in my life that I can consciously recognize that I was experiencing a level of discernment that was guiding me, but I didn't understand any of that. I had no awareness of this. I was very much in the 3D world. I thought that all of this was real. I thought that this is what it is. God created this planet, created these people, created all of these things. These people get to have, these people get to not have. These are good people, these are bad people. It's all God's will. So I was very much in that dualistic way of thinking. And then I began to go down the rabbit holes that I know I was totally guided, completely guided by Jesus. As a matter of fact, one time while I was reading the book, the Da Vinci Code, I felt the presence of Jesus. And I remember my husband at the time, which was the father of my children, was there. And I was like, is right there. And he was kind of looking at me like, what's going on with you? You're a little cuckoo. I'm like, I became speechless and I was observing the presence of Jesus right there. Happened to be right behind where my husband was sitting. And I knew that I was reading the Da Vinci Code very specifically to activate in me the recognition that there are things in this world that are not as they seem. That led me then to the next book by Dan Brown. I was talking to my daughter about this. She read those books too, and she said it sparked some things in her. Then I read the book Angels and Demons. And man, the sacrificing and human sacrificing and all the stuff that they did in that book, and I don't remember all the details, but I began to realize how can there be all of this evil, the demons and all of these angels, the people who are wanting to do good? How can God create that? These are two opposite things. How can the one creator create such opposite things? It made no sense. And then I began to feel the presence of Jesus on a more regular basis. And I was guided to read a lot of different books that helped me really understand the politics of religion. And once I began to understand that, I began to realize, oh, so much about God and and Jesus is made up because specifically the Catholic Church knew that the teachings of Jesus, which is why he was killed, the teachings of Jesus were going to liberate each and every one of us to have a direct relationship with God. Jesus was telling us that he was the way, not because he's this holy, only perfect, sacred, beloved Son of God, the only one that ever existed, and he was the only way for us to discover that. He is the way because he broke free from the conditioning of at the time he grew up in the Jewish faith. And inside of that faith, that culture, that way of believing, that's the Old Testament. That is the information about this God that demanded sacrifices. And he was like, that's not my father. My father is a loving father. I will show you the way to come to know that loving father. But for you to come to know your loving father, you've got to purify your mind. You've got to renew your mind. So the emperor decided we're not going to put the stuff in this Bible, or we're not going to emphasize too much how to come to that place. And the reason they crucified Jesus earlier and then 320 years later, Emperor Constantine didn't want those facts in the Bible is because when you know the truth of who you are, you do not need to bow down to any idols. You don't need to bow down to popes and leaders and emperors and presidents and kings and queens. You don't need to do that. As a matter of fact, there would be no need for any of those idols because everybody would recognize that we are each created equal, endowed by our creator. And this is even in the Constitution, which is one of those things that later on in life I came to realize that was channeled information. That the aspects about our founding documents are channeled because they were speaking through people who were seeking liberation from those very idols, the oppressors, the kings, the monarchy. They knew we were created to be equal, that we should all experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of property, I believe is what it said originally, so that we could all have an experience of freedom without being labeled and put into specific castes and specific hierarchical levels. So, as I am moving through all of this understanding about the truth that Jesus was attempting to teach us and why the Catholic Church made sure that the teachings that Jesus gave, the true teachings that empowered us, that those things were burnt. They burnt down the libraries that contained this information. They got rid of as many of those things. They even killed a lot of the people who were teaching the truth that Jesus came to teach. Fortunately, some of those documents, some of those old written texts on papyrus paper, many that began to fall apart, but many that were preserved in clay jars were found in different sites around, mostly around the African area. And what did they say? These were the Bibles of Mary Magdalene, the Bibles of Thomas, of different apostles that were actually with Jesus, and their teachings had been handed down and had been preserved. The Essene texts, all of them collaborated with the fact that Jesus saw us as his brothers and sisters, all equal, men and women, no separation, no division. Jesus never said that the church had to have only men. That was all made up. Again, those who seek to control others are doing so by instilling fear within those that they're controlling so that they never want to question what they're being told. And you know what the primary fear that they instill in us is? The fear of not really knowing God. Because if you know God, you know your creator. If you know your creator, you know what you're made of. You cannot not be like your creator. And even the Bible tells us we were made in the image of God. And when you begin to understand what that means, you begin to really realize that who you are is powerful beyond measure. It is absolutely magnificent. You are good. You are kind. You are gentle. You are joyful. You are loving. You are honest. You are faithful. You are trusting. You're open minded. Because those are the qualities, those are the characteristics of every person who comes to know God within. You can do no harm because you understand the goodness that you are made of. The reason we have the insanity that we have in the world right now, I was just listening to, as I'm learning more about the new financial system, there are certain people that I like to listen to because I do not invest in the old financial system. I only invest in the new financial system. And of course, it's not well known yet. And the powers that, that be, don't want us to understand that because when the new financial system gains its strength, the old one is going to collapse. Just as so many people are pulling away from the medical system, the old medical system, they're not paying for insurance. They've decided to stop going to regular doctors. They're seeking holistic doctors. Well, what happens when the numbers go down here? They got to go somewhere. So they go to the new medical system. They're creating the new way of doing medicine. Well, same thing's going to happen with the financial system. People come down from here, they go and put their money, as I am, into the new financial system. Same thing has happened with religion. Most of us were following what we were told. You start coming out of that, and where do you go? You start following other things. You follow spirituality, you follow new age, you go become atheist, you go into nature, you start doing all kinds of things. For me, I found A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles was the very first teaching. And I had studied by that point, I had probably read over 500 books, studied a whole bunch of different religions. Probably one of the closest ones to speaking to my heart was probably the Baha'i faith, which is relatively new still, but it's closest to what I have found resonated within my heart. And then I found A Course in Miracles, which absolutely, absolutely has changed me because it has given me the truth of what God is. It has matched what I knew within me was possible. And that's the thing. All of us have the truth of our creator within us. And as I'm listening to this woman who was speaking on the new financial system, she was talking about um, the lies that were shared about this new crypto, which is XRP crypto. It's a rail system. It just has to do with the new quantum financial system. And she was saying she went into the Epstein files, and in the Epstein files back in 2014, a long time ago, before anybody was talking about crypto, in those files, there was a deliberate attempt to sabotage this company, Ripple and XRP. Why? Because those who want to consider themselves the elite, the top, the in the hierarchy, the haves, they don't want the have-nots to have access to anything that could be beneficial. It happens in the religious world. It happens, this is why they killed Jesus. They didn't want the regular people, which is the majority, by the way, more than the 99%, to have all that information. Because if the 99% knew that they could have a direct relationship with God, what do they need the 1% for? You don't. Well, that's the greatest fear of those who are controlling, those who have put themselves on the pedestal as if that they are the ones who know it all. So it's it's hidden in religion, deliberately hidden in religion. For thousands of years, it is hidden in religion. Same thing happened with the finances, the opportunities for humanity to participate at the beginning of the new financial system that is going to be here for hundreds of years. Well, the 1% doesn't want people to know about that. Look at medicine. Look at what has happened when the Rockefeller medical system began to take place. Well, what did they do? They began to shame and to ostracize and to belittle and speak untruths about all of the holistic doctors that were at the time there. Well, those were quacks. They were all labeled quacks because they used natural things. They used things that came directly from God to heal. Well, we're not going to have that because we got to sell you our pharmaceutical medicine. So when you begin to go down this path that A Course in Miracles lays for us, we begin to train our mind. The training of the mind helps us sort things out into two categories: what is not true, what is made up. We call that, the ego thought system, the wrong thought system because it's incorrect. And then what is true according to God, according to love, according to that which is in alignment with what Jesus has been trying to teach us for 2,000 years. When you begin to sort things out into those two categories, you begin to fully understand that every single one of us must come to the point of making decisions. Those decisions are, do I keep following what I've been told that now I know does not feel right? Maybe you knew it didn't feel right when you were little, but you couldn't say anything about it. Maybe in your early 20s, 30s, you knew there was something off about the system that you operated in, the things that you needed to do to get ahead, to be safe, to be protected. Maybe you knew it was off, but you had all the responsibilities. You had a family to feed, you had a car payment to make, you had a house and a mortgage to take care of. You had plus all of the conditioning that we have received. You had to keep up with the Joneses, so you had to work extra hard to save up money and appear to be better off than you were. All of those appearances that we were taught to keep going, to have all of that, you were feeding the machine that sent your resources to the 1%. Is that fair? Is that fair that you work super hard and you send the money to those who then decide? Look at our government right now, all of the information that is being discovered, how almost half of the tax dollars that go to our government for years, probably for 100 years, if not more. Well, since the taxing system began, which was in 1913. When you begin to understand that so much of what we do to do the right thing then funnels all of this money, funnels all of this power for those to use that are not necessarily for the greater good of all. They're discovering that half of the taxpayer dollars are being used for fraud, have been for a long time. And that's why there's such an uproar. People, some want to find out what is fraudulent so that they can correct it, and some don't want you to find out what is fraudulent because that goes into their pockets. So it's pervasive everywhere. When you don't know who you are, you fall for whatever somebody who knows that you don't know who you are wants to control you into supporting. This is why it's crucial that we come to have a direct relationship with our Creator. Because again, when you know what made you, when you know the truth of what made you, you discover the best that is within you. You begin to recognize that everybody on this planet, every living being has the seed within them, the essence within them of that goodness. And then you can begin to realize and recognize because you become self-aware within you first, and you can become aware of it in everybody else. Anybody that does not operate from their innate goodness is operating from a faulty thought system that has them think that they're not who they are. So inside of us is the truth, and then there are all the blocks to the truth, all of the beliefs that we were taught, like I was, to be afraid of God, to be afraid of all these things that the Catholic religion instilled in me, and plus all the lies within my, the Latin culture that I grew up in. Men are better, and men get to do whatever they want to do, and women just have to do whatever they're supposed to do. Um, and because it's always about taking care of the patriarchy. So you've got the essence within every single one is the truth of who we are, covered up by layers of untruths. This journey, when you begin to feel like enough is enough, when you begin to move to that place where you have tried everything, drugs and alcohol and sexing and people pleasing or workaholic, being a workaholic, and you've made all the money and you still feel like you are not there yet, like you haven't achieved what it is that you're attempting to become, or you haven't numbed the discomfort that you are experiencing because you know that somehow that feels so uncomfortable. Well, that's our innate uh, signal. You're believing things that are not true. But because we're not taught to question what is not true, because we are growing up in the system that wants us to believe what's not true. That is what supports the system of corruption, the system of lies, the system of people giving their power away, people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for an image that they can't even control. When you begin to feel that longing within your heart, and you're willing to risk whatever it takes, you're willing to stop your addiction, you're willing to stop the facade of working a job that you don't like, you're willing to stop being in a marriage where you're not happy. When you are willing to stop, to put an end to the pain, then you become open to what is the truth that will bring me to that place of joy. Well, let me tell you, friends, this is not an easy road, but it is very simple. You've got to be willing to question your thoughts. You've got to be willing to take a very introspective journey and come within, look at your beliefs, look at everything that tells you that you're not who you are, and then look at everything that you believe is true about who you are. Now, for a while, you're going to have your ego involved in all of it. But at some point, when you begin to look to become the observer, this is where the magic happens. You have to become the presence of awareness, the observer of your own thoughts. And then you have to, there's no other way. You have to put them into two buckets. That which feels loving, that which feels peaceful, and the thoughts and beliefs that feel uncomfortable, that cause your distress, your anxiety, your worry, your fears. You have to sort them out. Why? Because they're totally opposite to each other. That which is loving is what is natural and true about every single one of us. That which is fearful is unnatural, but it has been normalized. And it is what we have each been trained to think is who we are and how things go. When you sort these two things out, for a while, it is very startling because you're realizing, oh my gosh, I knew this was what I felt within me. I felt the yearning to experience life this way, to be kind, to be gentle, to follow my passion, to do what felt natural to me. But I didn't do those things because I was trying to do what I was told was right. Well, this is normal. All of us have been normalized into believing things that are not true. Now, those who break free from that, those who begin to question things and begin to speak to this, well, they're labeled crazy, they're burnt at the stake, they are crucified. Many of them are called troublemakers. Some of them are put into insane asylums, and many are called conspiracy theorists because they're speaking to the truth that you know within every fiber of your being. But sometimes you can't quite prove it because this is a change that happens internally. And when you begin to feel the truth of that within you, it alters you. And here's a way that it alters you: it makes you feel peaceful, it makes you more joyful, it makes you more honest, it makes you more gentle. But it also makes you more courageous. It makes you more willing to stand up for what is true. It makes you like Jesus, willing to, okay, you can sacrifice me. Because when you come to understand the truth of who you are, you begin to recognize that you are an eternal being. What you are is made of pure energy, pure consciousness. And then you begin to move into the realms where you realize, oh my gosh, it's infinite, meaning it's pretty freaking vast. It's not just what happens in your own little life, in your own little community, in your own little planet, your own little world. This is universal. It's part of the universe of universes. And then you begin to realize, well, just as God created me, imagined me into existence, it's imagined all kinds of things, all kinds of different civilizations and different planets and different beings and different, you can call them ETs, whatever you want to call them. God didn't just create humans. God's imagination is infinite. And all that God has created has been created from the same essence, which is love. And every single one of us, because what love does is love frees everything to be whatever it wants to experience, whatever it wants to experience. It cannot be anything other than love, but it can experience itself as not that. That's the power of free will. When I began to understand this, that's when I began to realize, oh, so free will allows us to have the experience of believing that I'm separate from God, that I'm here as a human, that I can protect me, that I'm not connected to anybody else. After all, the church told me this group is good, this group is bad. So I can protect me. I can defend me from that other one. I can decide that I'm doing it the right way, so I'm better. And that satisfy the egoic need to be superior. So it has to make somebody else inferior. And if you grow up believing, well, you're inferior because you're not the right kind, you're not the right color, you're not the right sex, you're not the right, gender or whatever, then our minds become filled with this inequality that we begin to defend as right. The haves, the have-nots, the favored, the most favored people of God and those who are not. That mentality of duality, of dividing and segregating people into what is good and what is bad is pure egoic. And we have the ability to do that because God loves us so much. Not that he gave his only son to die for us. That is all made up. God loves us so much that it allows each and every one of us to have whatever experience we want to have. Because God knows that we cannot not be what we are, but we can pretend not to be that. And Jesus was just like you and me, a child of God who made the decision to have an experience of incarnation, knowing full well that for a little while it might forget some of the truth of who he is, but he came on a mission to do whatever he needed to do, was born to a family who reminded him of the truth of who he was, even though he was indoctrinated into the Jewish faith. And Jesus, at a very early age, felt that calling to do his mission. The mission was to show us the way, to show us that when you commit to sorting through the beliefs that are not true, you will inevitably reach the place where you will know the truth of who you are. You don't have to believe it, you will know it. And when you know it, you then know God. This is why Jesus said, I and the Father are one. He was trying to tell us, I and the Father are one, but so are you. These wonderful things conveniently left out. Don't you see the plan here, the plot? To keep humanity from knowing the truth of who they were, because it was going to put a lot of people out of a job. But the only people that were going to be out of a job were those who were trying to tell us that we're not who we are. Less than the 1%. And this is the place that humanity is at right now. We're afraid of those that we have been conditioned to believe that it is normal that they have power over us. But here's the thing, they're the most scared, because if we wake up and remember who we are and we are not following what they're telling us, guess what happens? We flip. The 99%, do you think 99% of humanity would have more power over, 0.1%? We're talking billions versus maybe 100,000, if that. Really, those numbers are not that big. When you begin to realize that the only way humanity can be controlled is through fear, and fear is only possible through ignorance, and ignorance can only be sustainable through arrogance. And this is why we have been taught to believe that we are right. This is normal. This is the way. And in our arrogance, we don't want to know the truth. And in our ignorance, we don't know the truth, so we remain in fear. But if something inside of you is getting activated, you can feel that the things don't make sense. You can see the lies that are being perpetuated in all systems, education and medical. How is it? Please tell me, how is it that if we have all of the scientific prowess that we supposedly have, and we've raised so much money, how is it that we don't have the cure for cancer yet? But if we look back through history, we will find those who actually were curing people from cancer. And somehow those systems were not made widely available to the public. As a matter of fact, they were bought by big pharma and thrown into some drawer somewhere. When an organization deliberately withholds what makes people better, when a religion deliberately withholds the truths that set us free, when a government deliberately withholds the information that says that, yeah, you guys are working really hard, but we're using most of your money to put it in our pockets instead of doing good things for you. When we become courageous enough to move past our arrogance, well, I already know it all, and begin to humble ourselves to question, okay, there's got to be another way, we will begin to have to face our fears, because those will become the obstacles that we must move through. And those fears are nothing but, we've heard the acronym of FEAR, false evidence appearing real. It's false evidence because it's made up. That's why it's false. And as you begin to move through your fears, as you begin to do the thing that you thought you couldn't do, as you begin to move through speaking your mind when you used to be afraid not to, as you begin to question the establishment, as you begin to say, no, I'm not going to participate in that anymore. I'm watching people left and right. I mean, it's fascinating. Even doctors not paying for medical insurance. That's something I started doing like 8 or 9 years ago. It was like, this is a racket. I'm not participating in this. And at that time, it was like, well, if you don't have medical insurance, then you're going to be fined when you pay your taxes. I'm like, fine me. You can find me all you want. I am not contributing to something that I knew was unloving, was not of God, because I was already feeling the power of God. And God does not create anything anything that hurts a brother or a sister. So if it hurts somebody, if it benefits some and hurts others, it is man-made because they're listening to the voice of their ego. Nothing that is loving will ever attempt to hurt a brother or a sister. But we have to move through the arrogance that I already know it all and come to the place where we're willing to look at how ignorant we are about the truth that will set us free. That's why only truth, capital T truth, sets us free. Because when you know, you do different. You behave differently. You will not participate in anything that is confining you. Deliberately, you won't do it. You will only participate in that which liberates you. And then you come to the place when you've done enough work in yourself and you realize, wow, this is everybody else. Else has been under the same trance I've been in. This is where the Course in Miracles teaches us about forgiveness. Because if you don't forgive yourself for not knowing, you then cannot forgive others for not knowing. And then the Course makes it really, really simple for us to understand as you move deeper into your journey. And it takes time to get there, especially for those of us of the older generation. It takes time because it's so ingrained. And we were born, we incarnated into a thicker density of lies, and everybody did it. Now, the children that are being born now, especially after the harmonic convergence of 1986, those kids are born with a higher frequency, meaning they've got a stronger bullshit detector and they're not so afraid to use it. Like maybe some of us, I had that bullshit detector, but I was too afraid. I wasn't quite sure how to use that. I was afraid to speak up, and I didn't want to get in trouble. But my kids, oh my gosh, they would call me out on my BS, and they definitely were calling things out on the BS in the world, which is beautiful to see. The younger ones, even faster. It's amazing. It's just beautiful to see. But when you move down the path of A Course in Miracles, there are very specific things that you need to do. First, you've got to commit. You have to commit to taking the teachings that are in the course, and you have to make a decision that if they resonate with your soul, that they must be true, even if you don't fully understand them. Because the understanding comes through the practice of these teachings, and then they become natural again because you're fighting what has been normalized. You're going against beliefs that tell you God is good, that you and God are one. And when you've been told that God is wrathful and mean and it's going to punish you and turn you into, or it's going to rain down fire and brimstone, and God is out there somewhere, those beliefs you've got and then in your own mind realize, okay, this is what I was taught, this is what is normal, this is what my church says, this is normal, but what is natural? I'm feeling that God is loving. Then you have to make a decision. Then these beliefs are not true. And then you're going to have to deal with your family's going to think you're a little crazy. You might even be labeled a conspiracy theorist because you're finding out the truth and it's going against what others believe. And if they're not on that same journey, they're hunkering down. Why? Because they're arrogant. I'm right. This is the right way. And their arrogance comes from the ignorance. They don't know. They don't remember the truth. So how are they going to know it? You're going to have to model it. So for a while, this is a very lonely journey because you're doing this internal work. You're shifting your beliefs from lies to truth, but you're having your own internal battle because you're going, but this is what I've known. Oh, and then you hear these beautiful teachings. I am love, but I'm an idiot. I've got anxiety and I'm not good enough. You have to decide, well, which of these two are true? For a while, you're going to feel schizophrenic. That's part of the game. Part of the game. And I call it a game because we're all safe in the mind of God pretending that we're not. That's a game. That's a game. God did not put us here to suffer. God gave us free will and we decided to have this experience of forgetting. The Course in Miracles helps you remember. But then you have to decide that that is true and then you have to act from that. Your thoughts, your words, your actions then have to match. For a long time, I had the thoughts in my head, but I couldn't quite get the words and the action to move together. Then I had the thoughts in my head, and then I could speak it. But sometimes the action wasn't taking place. Sometimes I wasn't being as loving or as gentle. I was still protecting. I was still doing things. Sometimes I had the thought and the actions, but not the words. So I could think it and I could do a kind deed, but I was saying unloving things. So a combination of those things is going to happen. That's just part of the journey. It's an adventure. You're going on an adventure to totally, completely turn your world upside down, inside out. And then we come to some of the most beautiful lessons in the Course in Miracles. All of them are powerful. Every single one of them. Those of you who are in my classes, in the Awareness Academy, every time we do a lesson or we look at something in the text or in the manual for teachers, I go, this is such an exciting lesson. This is such a great part in the text because it is. But then there are these beautiful, beautiful poetry-like lessons in the course. Last week we looked at 221, 222. Today, let's look at 223 and 224. And the course is divided, workbook, the lessons are divided into two parts. From lesson 1 to 220 teaches us about the ego, teaches us about the inner work that has to happen to get our mind trained to remember the truth of who we are, to sift through what is normal and contrast it with what is natural, what is true, what is real. Then after 221, those lessons going forward are basically a reminder of our relationship with God. That is what is because we're made of God. The essence that is within us. That's why Jesus said, I and the Father are one. The life force that animates your body, your physical body, that is what is ultimately real about you. That is the true essence that is eternal, that when the body is laying there in a casket, totally, still because there's no animation, that energy that is no longer animating the body, that is the soul, the spirit that you are, that is an aspect of God. That is like the ray to the sun being God, and the ray being what animates your body. When your time is complete, that ray just leaves because it's eternal. It's no longer confined into that body mind complex. It is free to be whatever it wants to be next. Why? Because we have free will. This game keeps on going. But when you begin to cultivate a relationship with the essence of who you are, with that ray of light, with that life force, everything changes because now your focus is on what is eternal and true about you, not on what is temporary, which is the body. And you begin to cultivate a relationship with the body that is very different because you begin to use the body with the awareness that this is only a temporary vessel with more reverence. You take care of it better. You feed it the healthiest of foods. You feed it the healthiest of thoughts. You do with it the most healthiest of things because you want to extend the viability of this vessel because you know the truth of who you are and you want to share it. You want to extend that love that you are. It's just so beautiful. So lesson 223, God is my life. And these headings are like mantras that if you repeat them over and over and over again, they help to train your mind, and you feel the power of these words so strongly. God is my life. I have no life but His. Capital H, His. You are made of the same energy that God is made of. You are the essence of love itself. You are as holy as they come, but completely trained into forgetting all of that. Can you see? Can you see why forgiveness is so important? We have to forgive them. They knew not what they were doing. They knew that they were controlling us, but they did not know. Ultimately, when you come to know God, you cannot hurt a brother or sister. They knew that we were powerful beyond measure, but they did not know what they were missing when they were teaching us these things that are not true. We want to forgive those people because to forgive those who have committed these atrocities, who have done all of these things, is an act of you knowing the truth of who you are and living it, becoming an example of the kind of world that you want. And yes, some of the people who have done things in the Epstein files and the Wiener laptop and all of those, for thousands upon thousands of years who have, in the name of God, killed millions of our brothers and sisters. There are those who will take care of whatever justice they need to get. But when you go down this path of A Course in Miracles and you realize everybody's a child of God, all at the core are innocent, having different experiences, you begin to realize that by loving them through forgiveness, you're actually accelerating the shift of consciousness that is going to propel us from the 3D world of selfishness and greed and lies and fear to the 5D consciousness where the mind is operating from a higher frequency that brings about a world of integrity, of transparency, of collaboration and co-creation. So the sooner you commit to forgiveness, the sooner you are co-creating that kind of a world. And let those, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Let those who want to take revenge, let them do that. You will be guided to what is appropriate for you to contribute into the shift of this time that we're in. But do it from love within your heart and a recognition that all of us are equal. All of us are innocent, playing this game of forgetfulness and then falling into these psychological games that we've been playing that we have to work our way through. God is my life. I have no life but His. I was mistaken when I thought I lived apart from God, a separate entity that moved in isolation, unattached and housed within a body. Look at the power of those first three words, I was mistaken. That cannot be said until you have reached the level of maturity that you recognize, I don't know it all, and maybe what I knew wasn't accurate. I was mistaken. Gently recognize the truth that begins to set you free. Because if you were mistaken, then you have to look at your mistakes. You have to look at your thoughts that facilitated those mistakes and begin to shift them. You question them. Sentence 2, now I know my life is God's. I have no other home, and I do not exist apart from Him. He has no thoughts that are not part of me, and I have none but those which are of Him. This is a statement that can only be felt in every fiber of your beingness when you fully trust that these words are true. When you recognize that God is pure consciousness, that it is nothing but the energy of all that is, that it is the infinite source that everything is made of. Now, of course, to come to really get comfortable with this, some people, I did, have to go down the path of understanding a little bit about quantum physics to realize that everything is made of energy, movement, space. And when you let yourself, which is very offensive to the ego, recognize that you're not your body. You have one, but that's not who you are. And you begin to cultivate a relationship with it. What am I instead? You begin to create a relationship with the part of you that is eternal, that part that's going to leave the body when it's time for you to lay the body aside, when this game is over, when you're ready to take off the costume. And the you that leaves is non-physical. When you get comfortable with that, you begin to recognize that you cannot exist apart from God, like the rays of the sun cannot exist apart from the sun. You are that ray of light, born into this planet through your decision to have an experience apart from God. But you cannot have left God, but your mind got trained into believing you did. This is why the Course in Miracles is a course in mind training, to train your mind to come back to the truth of who you are. You're the energy that animates your body. Are you enjoying your body? Great. You don't like your body? Change it, fix it, do whatever you want to do to it. Ultimately, that's not who you are. What you are, because it's not a who, it's what you are, is the essence of love itself, is the light of God, expressed here on this planet to bring the illumination that we need so that we can all see what we have been making in the dark. When you get comfortable that he has no thoughts that are not part of you, and that we have none but those which are of him, we begin to accept that if God is love, then I must be loved too. Why am I entertaining fear? Why am I entertaining worry? Because you learn them. You learn to accept them. And because you didn't question them, because mommy did it, and sister did it, and grandpa did it, and everybody else does it. Oh, my idols do it. When we didn't question what was not natural, we made it normal. We normalized it, and we all agreed to it. That is why we have to move through this place of curiosity where we question things. And then we come to these beautiful truths that begin to set us free. Then there's a beautiful prayer that goes with this lesson. Our Father, let us see the face of Christ instead of our mistakes. What is Christ? Christ is nothing more than the recognition of that light that is inside of me. That is what God is. That's what Jesus did. Father and I are one. God and I are one, as he recognized the Christed light within him. And that's what he is teaching us through A Course in Miracles 2,000 years later. You would think he would have liked to have retired by now. But if you're eternal, you don't get tired. You want to continue to help your brothers and sisters. This is what we talked about in our class last night in the Awareness Academy, is that you feel the desire. It's like a debt that you're paying back, but it's not a debt that feels heavy. It's a willingness to help others because it set you free. Now, you want your brothers and sisters to know the truth, not by forcing them to wake up, but by being what you are and then sharing with anybody that asks you, how are you so happy? How are you so peaceful? The Christ instead of us is where we begin to feel the truth of who we are and we begin to forgive our mistakes. We made mistakes because we did not know better. Now we do. So, our Father, let us see the face of Christ instead of our mistakes. For we who are your holy son and daughter are sinless. We would look upon our sinlessness, for guilt proclaims that we are not your son. This is why we have to give up being guilty that we got bamboozled into believing we are less than what we are. We got to let that go. Because that guilt of, oh my gosh, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't know better and I made so many mistakes and I cheated and I lied and maybe I even murdered or participated in the corruption that hurt millions of people. Forgive yourself. You did not know better. You did not know what you were doing because you didn't remember who you are. And when we get to that place where we recognize that as the truth of who we are, a holy child of God, then we can begin to see what has happened to the world. Most people don't remember who they are. No wonder they make mistakes. No wonder they do things that are unloving because they don't remember who they are. As we begin to remember that, as we begin to feel the Christ within us, and we begin to live from that as our truth, we begin to lighten up this place. We begin to shine something beautiful and bright that hasn't been seen too often. Yes, Jesus was an example of that, but look at how many years it's taken to get more of us to participate in this. We are the coming of the Christ. We are the second coming. Jesus is helping us specifically through the training of A Course in Miracles, and there are other ways. This is not the only way, but this is a required course because you have to understand the power of your mind. You can learn this through Buddhism, you can learn it through Hinduism, but eventually you have to come to know God directly because that is how you feel the Christ within you. Buddhism, Hinduism, they train the mind. Course in Miracles, it trains your mind. But then you've got to come to know God. This is the second part of these lessons, is your direct conversations with God so that you can begin to activate that frequency within you. Sentence 4. And we would not forget you longer. We are lonely here and long for heaven where we are at home. Today we would return. Our name is yours, and we acknowledge that we are your son. We are your daughter. This is not our mind, this is not home. We have to renew our mind, correct it, remember the truth of who we are. And when we remember the truth of who we are, then we bring about heaven on earth. Heaven is our natural home. But we have moved away from heaven, even though it's still within us. We have moved away by creating all of these illusions about what heaven would be like. And it's all material things, it's all stuff in the world that we accumulate and we gather and okay, this makes me better. This makes me happy. This makes me safe. And eventually, guess what? You can't take any of it with you. So can it really make you better or safe? No, it can't, but it can give the illusion that it does. And then you struggle to hold on to it. And we become prisoners to a system that perpetuates all of this stuff. But when you come to know that Christ within you, when you accept by humbling yourself, by letting go of the arrogance that thinks you know it all, by recognizing your ignorance, I did not know what I did not know. And you move into that humble space where you allow yourself to be shown the way. Course in Miracles will do that for you. So I created the Awareness Academy for anybody who wants to go deeper into these teachings. I've been at my journey for almost 25 plus years. I've been teaching for almost 20. I've been a student and a teacher of the Course in Miracles for about 14 of those years, six, something like that. My greatest joy is to share what I have discovered. I understand Jesus. I understand why Jesus doesn't stop. I'm not ever going to stop because there's nothing more joyful than to help a brother or sister remember the truth, especially when you understand that you are one with them. Why would you want to withhold this from anybody when it just adds to the collective knowingness that increases the illumination, the light, the goodness, the everything that is going to be co-creating a happy dream, a world that is going to be even more wonderful for my children and grandchildren and future incarnations that I might choose to experience. Why not build that? Let's go to the next lesson. Lesson 224. God is my father and he loves his son and his daughter. And if you have any issues with these words, with the word God or with the word son, look at your programming. I don't mind being called the son of God because my identification is as non-physical energy. And non-physical energy contains masculine and feminine. All of that is in it. So I don't care if I'm called son or I'm called daughter or I'm called it. It does not matter because I know what I am. But in the beginning, I got offended. Why is this saying son? I'm the daughter. Why didn't they make this son and daughter? Well, that's because I had issues with men. I had issues, with my father. I had issues with God. So I had worked through all that and remove all of those beliefs so I could come to the essence of it. And when you feel the truth, the words don't matter. The words are symbols of symbols. You come to the place where you recognize the truth. You feel it. That's why you got to clear your mind of all of those beliefs that filter what you are experiencing and create emotions based on reactions to your perceptions about what words mean. But when you move all through all of that stuff and you purify your mind, you feel it. Because the words don't matter. What matters is the essence behind them. And that's what Jesus is offering us. God is my Father. Consciousness is my creator. And he loves his son. It loves me. My true identity is so secure, so lofty, sinless, glorious, and great, wholly beneficent, and free from guilt, that heaven looks to it to give it light. When we accept who we are, we look to it. Get comfortable, you're in it too. And not the scary movie It. I wonder if that's why they called it It, to scare us so that when we found truths like this, we would even be afraid of being it. No, we are it. We are the holy divine being that has been playing a game of hide and seek. We've been hiding all this time. And guess what? Tag, you're it. Here we are. Our true identity is so secure. We can dilly-dally with the ego. We can pretend to not be what we are, but we will always return to the truth of who we are. We have been returning to that after we die, and we realize that's why all those near-death experiencers, they pop out and they see the light and they realize the truth. Well, guess what? We're in the middle of. We're in the middle of what is known as ascension, as the shift, as the golden age, whatever you want to call it, where we begin to remember the truth while we are still in these physical bodies. We don't have to have the physical death experience, because what we're doing is we're infusing this physical vessel with the knowingness, the truth of who we are, so that we can ground on this planet heaven on earth, so that we can be the bringers of the truth and the light and the life and the integrity and the honesty and the gentleness and the kindness and the collaboration that this world hasn't really experienced, because it's been operating with lies and deceit and corruption. When we recognize that we are wholly beneficent and free from guilt, and we accept our rightful place, when we accept that we're free from guilt, and we stop, projecting our guilt on others, and we start seeing brothers and sisters who have lost their way, we will become the light that will illuminate the path for them, just as Jesus illuminated the path for us. It lights the world as well. The whole world is getting lit up. That's why so much darkness is surfacing. Not because it wasn't there, but because we couldn't see it. We had blinders on. We were lying and cheating and corrupt ourselves. We couldn't see the corruption of others. We were swimming inside of the density of corruption and fear and competition. But we started operating from love and kindness and generosity. And now we begin to see, and we can look at all of the darkness that has been on this planet. We can go, oh my gosh, look, it's been going on for thousands upon thousands of years. So we have to turn on the light in us to be able to see more clearly, because this world has been very dark. We walk into this dark room now with a flashlight. More of us unite and turn our light on, then we've got, massive beams that are illuminating. We're going to see all that has been hidden in darkness, all those cockroaches that were, those critters, those ways that we have been deceiving one another. We're going to see them. They were always there, but we had blinders on. Such a beautiful thing. You begin this journey to get to know who you are. You discover you are the Christ. You discover that you are an aspect of God here to bring light for one reason and one reason only: to play the game with love, to play the game with truth. How fun is that? Sentence 3 says, "It is the gift my Father gave to me, the one as well I give the world." This is where you're operating in that mature frequency, because you recognize that you have received this truth about you. You have received the gift that is setting you free. Now you begin to set your brothers and sisters free. You recognize that God gave you the gift of life, the gift of love, the gift of sinlessness. So you must extend that to everybody else. There is no gift but this that can be either given or received. This is reality, and only this. This is illusion's end. It is the truth. That's why truth sets us free. When you discover the truth of who you are, there is nobody else to bind into the illusion of that which is dark. Instead of seeing the criminals, bad people, you see these are people whose minds have been conditioned just like you did, just like every one of us was. And maybe they dropped lower into the place of deception and what they were willing to do. But that's because God gives us infinite free will. We can be as dark as we want to be. God is not going to judge us. That is fallacies from the Bible. They tell us that God's going to judge us so that it gives permission to the powers that be to judge us and to set up justice systems where they get decided we're innocent or guilty. We need to give that nonsense up. Those are childish games that we've been playing. and mature out of that into recognizing that if love is what you are, then love is what you must extend. And it has to include forgiveness. It doesn't mean we don't do something about it. These people who are doing things that are harmful to others, well, the most loving thing that we can do to them besides forgive them is to move them to a place where they can be rehabilitated, where their minds can be trained. Maybe they need to be in jail. There are wonderful ministries in jail. There's actually a Course in Miracles ministries in jails. There are lots of places where people can be rehabilitated, and we will use those methods until we don't need them anymore. But for now, it is not about condoning bad behavior, but it's about recognizing that bad behavior is because you don't know the truth of who you are. That doesn't make them bad people. That just makes them ignorant people. And when they think their way is better than somebody else's, it makes them arrogant. Because ignorance and arrogance are two sides of the same coin. I only know that because I saw that in myself. The prayer, the prayer. Oh, so beautiful. My name, O Father, still is unknown to you. I'm sorry, I read that totally wrong. My name, O Father, is still is known to you. I think somewhere in the Bible it says that God knows every hair in our head. God knows us. God knows us. My name, O Father, still is known to you. I have forgotten it and do not know where I am going, who I am, or what it is I do. Remind me, Father, now, for I am weary of the world I see. Reveal what you would have me see instead. This is removing arrogance. This is removing ignorance. Because you come to God and go, God, you still know me. You know the truth about me. I'm going to stop thinking I know who I am, and I'm going to start listening to what you have to say. I'm going to start allowing the feeling that is being activated in me when I think the words, I am holy. What does that mean? The voice for God, that Holy Spirit within us, will activate these experiences if we come with total and complete sincerity. And sincerity means that you come to God to feel what you are. If you say that I am holy, if you say that I am sinless, I want to feel that. And watch that ego that tells you, well, who do you think you are? No, you can't be innocent. Remember, you did this and that in third grade? Remember how you stole lunch money from somebody or you stole the pen from the bank? If you entertain the ego trying to pull you out of that moment of experience, well, you still have work to do. You still have to train your mind. Because to come to feel the essence of God in you first requires that you absolutely believe that it is true. You know, this world has trained us totally, completely, incorrectly that you have to see it to believe it. The truth, you have to believe it to see it. You have to believe it to feel it. And to believe it means that you stop all thoughts that go against it. To believe it means that you are committing to accepting that this is true. And some of the most humbling experiences that I had were when I was sitting with A Course in Miracles and I was saying, I am holy. And I could feel the ickiness of my ego coming up and just letting me know, no, you're not. Look at how you've lied. And all of a sudden, it's like the life review happened. And all of the things that I had done wrong, all of the things that I had done that were unloving and uncaring would flood my mind. And I would sit there and I would say, I am holy. And I'm feeling all this density. I'm feeling this blanket of grossness coming over me. But I did not budge. If God says that I am holy, that is the voice that I'm going to believe. And everything else, sorry, Charlie, we are going to let that burn. And I would sit in what I call the fire of purification. It was that purifier, purifying my mind, burning away all of those lies that are residuals in the mind. But they have to be recognize so that you know what you're saying no to. Then you know what it is that you're saying yes to. And those were some of the most incredible experiences of forgiveness that I would have when I would say I am holy, when I said I am innocent. Oh my gosh, my ego was happy to bring the long list. It was like an infinite list of things where I was not innocent, where I was guilty. But I knew the truth was going to set me free, and I'd already made a decision. If God said I'm innocent, by gosh, I'm going to find that innocence in me. I am going to become so familiar with that innocence that that will be my new reality. But to get to that, I needed to burn through all of the beliefs that I had that gave me evidence of why that was not true. And then I began to shift. I began to shift my allegiance from the ego to God's voice within me. And I could feel that truth, that power, that incredible feeling of perfection. And for a while, I would never tell anybody that I was holy. And then about 10 years ago, I did an event at Unity Church. And I talked to the minister. I said, let's do a day here where we focus on the fact that we are holy. There was a song that came out at that time and said, I'm sexy and I know it. And I told the minister, Richard, I said, we're going to make bracelets that say, I'm holy and I know it. And we did. And we made those bracelets and we passed them out. And the whole service was about our holiness. And boy, I bet everybody that was saying those words, I'm holy, they were squirming because the ego didn't want them to accept that. So try it. And like the old commercials, you'll like it. Give it a try. You're going to like it. But it may be uncomfortable at first if you're not used to being honest with yourself by claiming if God thinks I am innocent, if God knows me as innocent, then who am I to entertain thoughts that contradict that? So this is the transmission 236 of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. And today is what, March 25th, and we looked at lesson 223, 224. If you want to go deeper into the course, join us in the Awareness Academy. We would love to share with you what is possible when you really commit to accepting the teachings of the course as your truth. It will turn your life upside down, but in a good way. It's going to make you more authentic. It's going to make you more peaceful, more, happier. I mean, that alone makes the world a better place. It's like that old song, what the world needs now is, love, sweet love. This is what the course is here to activate within us, is a love for ourselves that requires that we accept ourselves as God created us, not as our ego beliefs that we are based on the programming that we receive by those who did not know better. It is time for us to take control of our mind because our mind is what decides if our heart closes or if it opens. When you train your mind into truth, your heart automatically opens because you know that there is nothing here to be afraid of. You know you can love anything and everything. And that's what the world needs now. Love, sweet love. Thank you all so much for being here. I love and appreciate you. Thank you, brother. Thank you, sisters. I just love seeing you here. It's always so beautiful, and I'll see you guys in the academy. Thank you all so much. I love you. Bye-bye.